Welcome to Book Club Preview. I'm Michael, and today we're looking at Socrates Express, starting a new book and getting into some deep philosophy. And our first chapter, I guess, is called Dawn. And the question is how to get out of bed like Marcus Aurelius. And Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor who we learned a little bit about. But the chapter starts off with, oh, morning time. Oh. The author is on a train and he doesn't want to wake up. The light's shining and waking him up, and some lady saying, "Hello, it's morning time. The cafe is open." And he's like, "Oh, go away." And so he's having a hard time in the morning. In fact, he says, "I'm not a morning person. I like to sleep in." But as he's kind of waking up, he grabs his book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And really, he tells us that Marcus Aurelius liked to sleep in, just like he likes to sleep in. And he goes into more detail later, but Marcus Aurelius always had this battle between getting up or staying in bed. And he was an emperor. So even though Marcus Aurelius was this emperor and wealthy, and the author is kind of struggling writer traveling on a train with not many options or powers, they have the same enemy, waking up, or the morning. And he kind of considers the morning like this borderland between the mind, because sleep is a form of consciousness or subconsciousness, unconsciousness, and awake is another form of consciousness, but he calls them two different kinds of consciousness. But the morning time, they overlap as you come from one into the other, and those are kind of the borders of mind or reality. And then he gets to the question here. Okay, the great get out of bed question. Should I get out of bed? Why should I get out of bed? Maybe what's the first one? Should I get out of bed? Why should I get out of bed? I think those are the two questions, but maybe he words them in a slightly different way. And that is the question he kind of asks us, and we talk about it. And he mentions one philosopher, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but he talks about the is and the ought problem. Oftentimes we link, he gives the example, I think, of stealing. Stealing has negative consequences, therefore we ought not to do it. But the philosopher he talks about, he's like, no, we got to separate those. Yes, stealing might have a negative consequence, but it still questions whether we ought to do it. That's different. And so even though we should maybe get out of bed, should we ought to get out of bed? And we have to debate this problem. And so even though there's an answer, there's always this yet, blah, 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 blah. Yet, this philosophical hinge, this point that can flip everything. And in this question is yet. So I think why should we get out of bed? What is the point? And then he goes into a little bit more about Marcus. And he's like, Marcus was really cool because he was a philosopher king. He was still an emperor, a warrior going on battles, but he took the time to think. And he talks a little about his history growing up. He liked to read and he liked to think, and other kids thought it was a little bit weird. But that's where his passion was, with the Greeks. He wanted to learn more about the Greeks. So looking at some other philosophers and talking about philosophy in general, the author talks about, like, philosophy is about action. It's about doing something. Yeah, thinking about something is good, but if it doesn't move into your action, it's not actually philosophy. And so he kind of gives some examples. It's like talking about wine or drinking wine, talking about philosophy or doing philosophy. And Marcus was more about doing it, living it. He talks about his daughter a little bit here, with her perspective. She's also a person that likes to sleep in. She considers herself a lazy human being unless there's something worth doing. And then that starts us to a different question of, oh, maybe what gets us out of bed isn't why to get out of bed, but what is calling us out of bed. Something worth doing in our mind that pulls us out in a way. Then he goes back to Marcus and his writings and meditation. And Marcus says staying in bed is actually a kind of self-loathing. It's a lack of love. And when you really love yourself, you get out of bed. And when you really love the world, you get out of bed. And as he's writing this, a few paragraphs later, he's like, "No, I'm not leaving. I'm not getting out of my bed. I'm worthless. I'm just staying in here." And he chose to make today a bad day by not being good and getting out of bed. And then the author kind of agrees, like, yes, let's get out of bed. We need to love others. It's our duty to grow. Let's get off this blanket and get out of the train. And then the train kind of shakes and he falls back into bed, and it's warm and soft and cozy. And he says, "Okay, but 5 more minutes," and goes back to sleep. And that is the end of the chapter. A little bit different than what I was expecting, but still a lot of good information. A lot of vocabulary here. I'm going to hit these really fast. And so the first one is tumble dried. If you have a drying machine, it spins and tumbles the clothes and blows hot air on them to dry them. So I think his brain, I felt tumble dried or something. Unalloyed means pure, not mixed with other things. Undulating is kind of going up and down. The train is going up and down like a roller coaster. Astride means on top and across, like a horse. You ride on the horse, but you put your legs around it. So astride the horse. Affluence is wealth. Duvet is a thick blanket that you put on your bed. Simmering is like getting hot and just kind of maybe a little bit of boiling coming out of it, but not super hot. Just that little bit of to where it's maybe too hot to touch. Claptrap is nonsense. That's what it means. It means nonsense. So just a nonsense word. Duke it out means to fight it out. Duke is to fight and to finish your argument through fighting, or the problem through fighting, whatever. A few more here, sorry. Enamored means to be captured by in your mind. Maybe a beautiful girl or a handsome guy or some technology. Whoa, it just captures your attention. Enamored. And Aurelius was enamored by Greek culture. Snickered. It was kind of that kind of quiet laugh. And Aurelius's peers would laugh at him because he liked Greek culture, or he liked to sleep in, or he liked to read. Lenient means not tough, not strong. So when someone did something bad and they should get a really strong punishment, he would lessen the punishment or maybe even give them a second chance. Insurmountable means like impossible, unconquerable, overwhelming. Surmountable, think of like overcoming, climbing over a mountain. Insurmountable, meaning you can't climb over it. This word I had to look up, cloyingly, which is like very sweet. Cloying is very sweet, overly sweet. And the lady, it was overly too much sweet. And that leaves us with our discussion question. How do you get yourself out of bed when you're not obligated to? I mean, all of us, our mom or wife, our children, dad, they get us out of bed, or alarm clock pushes us out of bed. But when no one is waking you up, when you have freedom, maybe everyone's gone, you're just in the house by yourself, and you can choose when to wake up on your own time. How do you get yourself out of bed? And of course, please make your own discussion question. That is all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Book Club Preview. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.